Brendan Strong, you are the project manager scoring and standard setting at EBO. Welcome. Very nice to sit down with you this way, digitally, the way we do it, to talk about online proctoring, because wow, last year was crazy, and also crazy for you in terms of COVID-19 and everything that happened. And usually you host a lot of exams on an annual basis. Last year was completely different. Tell us a bit more about your experiences last year.
Sure. So normally the EBO would host an exam of up to 650 people every year in Paris in May. Last year actually was the 25th anniversary of the exam, so it was a big year for us. And we had actually intended to host a second exam in Berlin in November to accommodate the number of candidates coming through, number of applications coming through. And of course, COVID struck. So with the health guidelines and laws, of course, in many countries, it was impossible to host such a large exam. We did manage to host a small one with the Swiss candidates, which was fine for 2020 when no one knew what was going to happen. But come 2021, we knew, no, we have to host our exam. It's important for the EBO as an organization. It's important for our candidates who have spent years studying. And it's important for their future employers, who will be hospitals and health systems, that they have accredited, qualified people coming through. The EBO exam is one of the ways in which they know that people are accredited and qualified. So that brought us to the realization that we were going to have to host a fully online exam. It also brought us a lot of nervousness because we didn't know exactly how that would work. But thankfully, of course, we found ProctorExam, who could help us with the invigilation and monitoring of our candidates, as well as providing some kind of technical support for candidates, so that even though everyone was remote, the exam was conducted fully online, it was still a very human exam for our candidates taking it.
Now, in fact, that it's a human exam, or that it would be, was the main reason for you to choose ProctorExam. So the fact that ProctorExam believes in keeping the human factor in IT in many, many ways. Let's talk a bit more about that. So you decided to go fully online. You needed to continuity, obviously, and also a very important reason for society, as you were explaining. And then you talked to the team of ProctorExam. And how were your first conversations? What did you notice?
They were great. The first thing was definitely they instilled in us a great sense of confidence. The ProctorExam had really thought through the whole process, what was required in a fully online exam, even to the extent that they would have thought of things that we may not have ourselves. In our initial conversations, we had demos so that we could see the platform, we could understand how it worked, but more so we could understand that it was easy for our candidates. And not just that the system itself was easy, but that there was an opportunity for candidates to do a system check in advance of the exam. So they could go through what they would need to do to set themselves up for the exam in advance, so that on the day of the exam, all they needed to concern themselves with was taking the exam. They didn't have to worry about going through the proctoring process, but they also knew that the proctor would be there. And they could see both that they had a technical support chat function, and they could also chat with the proctor directly if they needed assistance. That's just from the candidate point of view. From our point of view then, we could see that the platform was very easy to use, that it would provide the level of invigilation that we required to ensure that we could have confidence in the exam, in that the candidates were being carefully monitored during the exam, and that if they did need any assistance, they would have it, so that the fact that the exam was online wasn't going to be any kind of a barrier to their actual performance.
Wonderful, wonderful. So from the candidate point of perspective, we could summarize it as easy to use, but also having people to help, to support, and then the system check around, let's say, 72 hours before the exam. That is important to manage expectations and to have, to give them a secure feeling before they start the exams. And then for me, on your side, obviously, making sure that there is no compromise in terms of quality, and that invigilation would be done appropriately online, because you knew how to do it offline, but now
Yes.
Online is a totally different game.
That's right.
So tell us more. You got a bit of feedback also from the ProctorExam team, and they consulted also on the setup. How was that?
No, that's right. Like, we obviously have our normal set of rules that we would have for people sitting the exam in the live setting. What was great with ProctorExam was that clearly they have a great deal of experience in the running of the online exam. So they could identify areas that we needed to call out as specific guidelines for our candidates or rules, so that both the proctor and the candidate understood what was expected of them, and everyone would understand what you were allowed to do and what you weren't allowed to do during the course of the exam.
Yes. Yes, and what you were allowed to do and what you weren't allowed to do, those guidelines were based on best practices, as you say, a lot of experiences that ProctorExam has, and obviously on your set of rules, which would occur in regular situations. But were there, for example, things you didn't think of and that, were put in those guidelines and added by ProctorExam that supported the entire process?
Yes. Yeah, a great example of that actually is the room sweep that ProctorExam had recommended that we do. And that essentially is to ask the proctor who's remote to have the candidate lift up their laptop and show the camera sweep around the room. And that way they could see that there was no textbooks or any unauthorized materials or anything else around the area. And also, I suppose, nobody else in the room with them at the same time. It was the sort of thing that we knew would be a challenge. How do we know that these things aren't there? But that ProctorExam had the solution for. And it was quite a simple solution at the end of the day. But again, as you say, it comes down to having the experience of having done so many, that they could direct us to a very simple and straightforward way to ensure the security of the exam.
Yes. And having the awareness of what is allowed and what isn't allowed, to make it very concrete on writing, because sometimes you think, oh, that's logical in a offline setting, but then you forget to really specify in an online setting, which is completely different.
That's right. And actually that was a great help.
Yes.
ProctorExam had told us just how specific we needed to be, which was important. As you say, you kind of assume things are common sense, but really you need to be quite specific as to what's allowed and what isn't allowed. So for example, we would allow our candidates to have a blank piece of paper and a pencil, but it's important then to specify that it has to be a blank piece of paper, that, it can't be, the back of a book, or, that also that they aren't allowed to have a textbook in the area. So it was very helpful to have that guidance from ProctorExam.
Now, another thing, talking about keeping the human factor in IT, another thing that was also important to you is to not go for an AI solution. Why? Can you explain a little bit?
We recognize the value of AI. There's definitely no question. But bearing in mind that for this particular exam online, we had over 400 candidates. So an AI system might just flag up what it felt was a contravention of the rules. But that would mean that we would then have to put in hours or time to look back over a candidate's exam to see, was that actually indeed a contravention of the rules? The benefit of having a human proctor was that they provided very specific but sharp notes about the type of things that they saw that they might have found suspicious. So that allowed us to go directly to, that allowed us to both prioritize and decide whether we needed to review the video specifically for that candidate.
Can you explain a little bit more how such a reporting that you got back, how that looked like, and why it was so easy to use?
Absolutely. It was great. It was a great system, very straightforward. Essentially, you get a spreadsheet and it'll have the list of observations. But the key thing is that there's 3 categories: green, amber, and red, which anyone who drives a car will understand. Green is go, so green is okay. Amber is a possible problem here or there, and red is a very serious or a suspicious case. Now, it's not just that. What then happens is, as I said, the proctor will provide a short note as to why it's been rated in that way, the kind of behavior that they saw that they were unsure of. But also included is a timestamp and a link directly to that point in the video. So you can click on a link, you can go straight to the candidate's video, you see the candidate taking the exam, you also see their screen at the time. So you can compare the two, you can watch it back, and also you can adjust the speed as you're watching the video. So, you know, if you think you need to watch for 5 or 6 minutes, you don't have to watch 5 or 6 full minutes. You can do it in really a minute when it's going on a fast forward system. So that made it very efficient for us to review any questionable or suspicious behavior, and also very easy to look back on if we needed to.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, looking forward to what is ahead of us, 2021, 22, we don't know entirely. It is a crazy period of, you know, a lot of indecision and insecurity, new varieties, new mutations of the you know, the virus, that also has a lot of impact on obviously having your regular exams and your programs on an annual basis. What sort of planning do you try to make for this year, for next year, and what do you see in the near future?
Sure. Well, actually, for this year, we're already going to do a second exam in November. That will be proctored again by ProctorExam. That's for 2021. I think in the near future, 2022 and 23, it's just still so uncertain. Nobody knows. Our exam is typically cited with a large National Ophthalmology Society meeting. So we don't know if those meetings will look the same. We don't know even next year whether it'll be possible to host the number of people in a single room. Maybe it will, but it's impossible to know at this point. You know, when you consider up until May or June of this year, we thought we had nearly defeated COVID because we had vaccines and the cases were coming down. And then there's been a spike with the Delta variant. So could there be another variant? We just don't know. But what we do know is that having had the experience with ProctorExam, that if we need, we can have certainty that we can hold these exams. We can hold them online if need be. And we know that they'll maintain the quality of the exam. We know candidates will be appropriately invigilated so that we can have confidence. The EBO as an organization can have confidence. Our candidates, who, to be fair, are studying hard and working hard towards this exam, they can have confidence in the quality of the exam. And then the health systems and the hospitals who will be employing them in the future can also have confidence that the candidates sat the exam in what would be almost the same as a live exam setting, but just online.
Now, it's too early to talk about maybe some business advantages, for example, cost efficiency or productivity or what have you. We don't know yet. And then this is an interesting case, you know, and we might come back to these questions at some point and have a follow-up. That would be amazing. But what we can know is that this, meaning online examination, makes education more accessible and also more democratic.
Yes.
All around the globe. Maybe also something you could speak to, Brendan.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to, actually, because it was in our discussions on next year and what we might be doing. It's one of the things that did come up. It hadn't really, it's one of the things that did come up, that candidates who may not be able to afford to travel to an exam center in Paris or Berlin, and it's not just the airfare, you know, often you're talking about having to feed yourself and having to pay for accommodation overnight. But also then, I suppose, candidates who might have a busier lifestyle, younger mothers, younger fathers, who may not be able to take 2 days to travel somewhere to sit an exam. Using an online exam system opens up the possibilities for those people and for more people who wouldn't otherwise be able to take such exams. And it still maintains that we know the quality of the exam is solid, that those people taking an exam from their offices, from their homes, that the quality of the exam hasn't been compromised, and that the candidates are being appropriately invigilated, so that we know that there's no suspicious behavior within the exams.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you so much. And I would say to be continued.
Yes, I'm sure it will be. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.